This was a studio called Stoic that I did 3 games with over the course of almost a decade called the Banner Saga. And those were all scored for Wind Band, like a college, like I had this, because it's like a Viking inspired, very somber, dirgy kind of vibe. And I remember falling in love with, I was not one of those band nerds. I was always much more of an orchestra guy. I played in band a little bit, trumpet as a kid, but otherwise it was not a big band nerd. But I had gone to the premiere in New York of John Corigliano's Third Symphony for Wind Ensemble. And I remember it just blew my mind. I realized I had sorely underestimated the power of Wind Ensemble as a creative potential. So I thought it could be amazing to do a game like that, where it's this huge brass and percussion and wind section and no strings. So ended up connecting with the conductor of that Corigliano, the guy who had commissioned Corigliano to write that piece, Jerry Junkin. And he was like, what if we recorded my orchestra? Like he had basically America's #1 professional ensemble. And for #1 wind ensemble, I should say, that like gives concerts like a regular symphony orchestra called the Dallas Wind Symphony. And so he said, what if we recorded in Dallas? This is an ensemble that had obviously never, they'd done a bunch of albums of like wind ensemble music, Frank Ticheli and all that kind of stuff, but they had never done a recording session. And the reason I'm telling all this is because it actually is an important runway into it. We recorded these big wind ensembles for that score, but the first thing that happened was in planning with them, we realized there's no way to feed click to this orchestra. Like we're recording in a concert hall. It's all an ad hoc studio that we're building in the green room backstage where the conductor, like the guest conductor would normally, change into their tux before the concert kind of thing. And so, they were at one point they were like, we can rent a bunch of radio transmitter headphones. And I was like, oh, good God, that just sounds like a nightmare. It's probably going to cause all kinds of interference. And it just sounded like a terrible idea. And so I found myself saying, I wonder if there's a way to write the score to not need click. Because I was pretty down the rabbit hole of working out an interactive music system. And like, of course, how can you possibly do interactive music all recorded wild? And so ended up landing at a solution where the idea was this turn-based combat that's sort of slow moving, which played to our favor. And so I said, well, what if you get this long, say a minute of music. And then once you pass a certain threshold in a battle, I want to up the stakes and up the drama by adding in new stuff. Now in conventional video game terms, you would basically stripe your orchestra and, obviously record it normally to a click, and, your brass are on a separate thing. And then they come in, just they get faded in or whatever by Wise. I've always been a little skeptical of that approach anyway, because it never really sounds like music. It just sounds like a DJ. So I had the thought of, well, because I can't record to a click, I can't really vertically stack stuff. There's no prelays. The ensemble is the cue. There's no like overdubbed anything at this point, because again, you have to have a click to be able to do that properly. So what I ended up doing was I said, well, what if it's just a different performance? What if I did a second take with all those extra instruments added in? And then I found myself going, you know what that actually lets me do? I can completely rebalance the dynamics as well. So it's not just add in brass, but like everyone can do the first one, mezzo piano. And then in order to account for all the extra instruments, we raise the dynamics and rebalance, and we get a whole other performance that it doesn't just add elements. It actually feels different in the way that dynamic shifts just feel different. This all began because I just needed a way to not depend on a click. So I was like, every time the battle progresses and the music kicks up a notch, we're shifting to a whole other performance. And because of the nature, again, the implementation that we came up with worked in our favor. It was operating more like train tracks, where when you passed the sort of arithmetic for what the battle, like for the needing to kind of progress the battle, like you've done enough damage and now the system goes, okay, it's time to move forward. It would basically register a change downstream, the same way a train track, you know, the turnstile moves like a mile ahead of you. So we would be in a loop, and then the idea is somewhere in the middle of the loop, the system gets the message, it's time to go. So it would play to the end of the loop and then just proceed straight into the next bit. So we didn't have to do any vertical shenanigans.
Yeah.
And even though it sounded like a loop of sorts,